global Flotilla is back on course after regrouping due to weather delays. The convoy of 14 vessels carrying humanitarian aid as well as international activists is currently heading towards Gaza with the aim of challenging Israel's naval blockade. The Israeli Minister of Security Itamar Ben-Gvir has labeled the flotilla as terrorists, a claim which has since been strongly refuted by those aboard the flotilla. It is expected to dock in Tunis on Sunday, where it will then be joined by more vessels. Now, the development comes as the Israeli military urged all residents of Gaza City to evacuate the city. Earlier today, Israel dropped thousands of leaflets over Gaza City, urging residents to flee the continuing military offensive towards what it says is an extended safe zone around Al-Mawasi in the south of the Strip. The area has previously been designated by Israel as a humanitarian zone, but it's been repeatedly bombed during the course of the conflict as dozens of people have been killed in and around Al-Mawasi, including several children who were queuing for water early this week. The United Nations early this week also warned the Israeli operations were already having horrific humanitarian consequences for those displaced families that are currently sheltering in Gaza City. All right, for more on this, let's now welcome analyst, author, as well as activist, Ms. Ayeesha Kajee. Ayeesha, it's a great pleasure to have you with us on the show. Welcome, as always. So let's start with the most recent of developments. Trump confirming he will not be attending the G20 summit in South Africa. Instead, his deputy J.D. Vance will be attending, representing the United States. What do you make of this move and its potential impact as well on the SA G20 presidency? Yes, it takes place amid ruptured tensions between the two nations, Ayeesha, over a range of political as well as economic issues.
Well, I think the fact that Mr. Trump didn't come firstly, was always going to be a bit of a slap on in the face for South Africa, but we were expecting it. The fact that he has designated his vice president, Mr. Vance, to come, who is a fairly senior official, is, I think, an indication that the U.S. is waking up to, the Trump administration is waking up to the fact that South Africa is an important partner. And that our presidency of the G20, which ends soon, with the US set to take over, and South Africa is punching above its weight in diplomatic circles more generally, particularly in multilateral ones such as BRICS, etc., is important, and that the US cannot afford to totally alienate South Africa, as it has attempted to do with the ridiculous tariff it has imposed, with the claims, again, pretty ludicrous, that there is a white genocide going on here, etc. And of course, with the US's own anger over South Africa's case at the ICJ regarding Gaza. So I think there's a consensus probably amongst Mr. Trump's aides that they cannot afford to totally alienate South Africa. So they have confirmed that they're sending Mr. Vance. He's next in line to Mr. Trump, so very senior indeed. And it is to be hoped that there will be an amicable handover of the G20 presidency, that the G20 will yield the kind of results that the agenda has set out thus far. Particularly with regard to, transnational trade, but also with regard to security issues, particularly those in Europe, in the Ukraine, regarding the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and also in the Middle East regarding the Gaza genocide.
Absolutely, Ayeesha. I mean, let's go to Israel now, where, of course, the peace flotillas are currently en route to Gaza, and activists as well as healthcare workers and a slew of other participants from well over 40 countries in support of this voyage. Ayeesha, I spoke yesterday to a correspondent in Tel Aviv about the security threats as well as risk to this mission, as past incidents have proven that anything can happen. How do you predict this voyage will actually end, and will it achieve its intended objectives on shining the spotlight on the current unfolding humanitarian crisis out in Gaza?
Well, I think it's already achieved that objective, quite frankly, Ayeesha, that the spotlight is very firmly on this flotilla and on what will happen. And because of that, many people are actually becoming more and more aware of what is going on, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, where several towns have been targeted by settlers, etc. But also particularly about the fact that in Gaza, Children are dying, people are dying, adults too are dying because much needed supplies are not getting in. Food is not getting in. There is no potable water. There is very intermittent electricity in some areas only. There are no medical supplies. So the situation is literally now a genocide by the withholding of food and other necessities for life.
I mean, let's further
And
expand.
that spotlight is something very much that the world has woken up to. Whether the flotilla will achieve its mission of getting aid in, that largely depends on Israel. And we've seen what they've done in the past. And we've seen that they've become more and more uncaring of world opinion. Particularly in recent weeks with the targeting of many, many thousands of civilians. So anything could happen. We pray and hope that particularly our fellow compatriots, the South Africans on the flotilla, are safe, but indeed that everybody who has been courageous enough to put their lives on the line to join this flotilla will be kept safe.
And just on that point, I mean, Ayeesha, the Israeli military calling those that are aboard the flotillas terrorists. I mean, it's quite concerning as well, because if you look at what happened to the other peace flotillas that had actually started making their voyage to Gaza, they'd either been attacked or even, of course, attacked by some military operatives in that particular region. Let's talk about the leaflets that have been dropped on Gaza City, urging citizens there to actually evacuate due to the ongoing military operation in the Gaza City. I mean, this is really concerning, Ayeesha.
Absolutely, particularly as they're being asked to evacuate to a so-called safe zone that has repeatedly been proven to not be safe because it's been directly targeted. Civilians there have been directly targeted by the Israeli occupation forces repeatedly. And particularly since the video was released by Hamas of the two Israeli hostages, the determination of the Israeli military to pretty much raise Gaza, despite their hostages' lives being in danger, shows that they're uncaring of human life, including Israeli life, but particularly, of course, uncaring of Palestinian and other life.
Bringing me to this next point then, Ayeesha, the killing of journalists that actually report on these matters is also something that should be strongly condemned. While over 274 journalists have been killed since the start of this conflict, where is international law actually failing us in putting a stop to this?
Well, I think international law is failing us, but more, all of those countries whose governments have been so much for decades, have been so much on the side of democracy and human rights, speaking up about it. Why are they so silent, Ayeesha? Why are those governments not putting their money where their mouths have been for so long about not killing journalists, about not eradicating witnesses? Because that is really what the killing of journalists and healthcare workers is about. It's about not leaving any witnesses to the fact that this is deliberate, it is intentional, it is a genocide. And I dare to say, actually, it is not just a genocide, it is now a Holocaust. And they don't want to leave witnesses to that, which is why the journalists and media workers and the doctors and healthcare workers have been so badly targeted or so specifically targeted in such large numbers. And the fact that these governments have not been able to stand up and speak up for this, that in fact, many of these governments are the ones standing in the way of the operation of international law to indict Israeli officials for the killing of journalists, for the killing of healthcare workers, and the killing of civilians more generally, shows that these governments are hypocritical, frankly, because they're actually obstructing the path of international human rights law by not actually condemning this, by not allowing the United Nations judicial organizations to actually do what they can, what little they can at this stage. They are obstructing, willfully obstructing, and thereby enabling the genocide, and particularly the targeting of journalists, media workers, and healthcare workers.
Ayeesha, maybe in closing, I'm currently looking at the global Flotilla tracker here. It's actually tracking all those vessels that are currently en route to Gaza. And so far, I can see that about 21 of them are still blue. They are sailing. But in the likelihood or event that there is an attack, these are international activists, Ayeesha. What then do you think would happen in the likelihood that there is an attack, whether or not by the Israeli military?
Well, I think an attack is probably more than likely. I think that the Israeli military will be certainly more careful in who it targets. For example, could you imagine, Ayeesha, the international outcry if somebody of the caliber of Greta Thunberg was killed? But I don't think that will happen. I hope that nobody will be killed. But right now, I'm very, very anxious. And I do think that the Israeli occupation force, the military arm of the Israeli state and the political arm of the Israeli state have become so infused with their own victory narrative that they will not hesitate, unfortunately, to attack this flotilla, to perhaps imprison even prominent activists who are part of the flotilla, people like Mandela, for example. I think, though, that they will stop short of killing at least the most celebrated of those activists. But for those who are not such household names on a global level, the outcome may not be as good. I hope I'm wrong. Right. But when we've seen Israel kill with such impunity over the last 2 years, and increasing, belief in its own invincibility, if you will.
All right, Ayeesha.
I think we can't hope for too much, unfortunately.
But every life should matter, whether or not you're a celebrity or you are deemed of higher status. Every life is a life, and it should definitely count. Ayeesha, it's always great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your invaluable input. As always, Ms. Ayeesha Kajee is an author, analyst, as well as activist on the various international matters that we're looking at, specifically the Middle East, and the announcement that President Donald Trump will not be gracing us with his presence during the G20 summit coming up in November. He will instead send his deputy, J.D. Vance.